Hello, welcome to our Curving Conversation series. It's great to have you with us today. I'm now joined by an amazing, talented designer, Colin Richmond, who you'll know from his work at Curve, shows like Grease, Beautiful Thing, Sunset Boulevard, and you may have seen Colin's work in theatres up and down the country. He's done loads of work at the RSC, on tour, big musicals like Annie. So hi, Colin, it's great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's good.
You're very welcome. It's wonderful to see you in your studio there. So shall we start right at the beginning then? How did you sort of get interested in theatre? When did you sort of first become aware of this magical thing called the theatre?
I think like a lot of people, I was exposed to theatre from a very young age. And whether I think it was I was the youngest of four kids, and I think I spent a lot of time playing pretend. So I think there's, and getting lost in my imagination and being a bit of a space cadet, I think. And my dad was a farmer, my mum was a chiropodist, or podiatrist, I guess they call it now. So quite different jobs, and they were both obviously freelance. So there's, that's kind of, it's quite nice to be freelance again. So you're in control of your own life and all of that. But there's, but I think it was my parents were very much involved in the arts as well. So my dad would take me to theatre when I was probably in my teens, maybe. He would take me to Saturday nights. He would take me to theatre to see different things. It didn't really matter what was on. The nearest theatre to us was the Riverside Theatre in Coleraine, which was a great little kind of wraparound theatre. And so I would see lots of different things, and even if it was youth groups, I would see I remember seeing Grease in there, and things like Dancing at Lunasa, and loads of different things I've actually gone on to design since as well. So there's lots of things I was exposed to as a kid, and I guess very young age, and it was all through my life. It just been always kind of there. And I'd always, even if I went to see, say, the first thing in the West End I went to see was Starlight Express, and it must have been maybe about 10 years old, 11 years old. And I came home and I made the set out of, it's a classic, out of old boxes, that kind of thing, painted it. I was obsessed by Batman as a kid, so I would make Gotham City, all the cars, all the models, all that stuff. And I'm still doing it. I mean, I guess I'm like Peter Pan, it's never grew up. I just get paid for it now. But there's so it's good. And I think, to say that I wanted to do it from a very young age is probably truth, but I never really knew what theatre design was. I never knew what that, as a terminology, I never knew that you could actually study it. I always thought that was just something you fell into, somebody fell into acting. I didn't know. I knew you could probably train as an actor and all that stuff, but I didn't know you could train as a theatre designer. So that came much later when I was looking for jobs to do with my life. But
And so when you were coming back after seeing Starlight Express and making, recreating John Napier's incredible design out of, packets of cornflakes and egg boxes and whatnot, did you know at that point there was this thing called a designer who was responsible for creating that whole look for that production, for example?
No, I never did really. And I think, I guess in my naivety at that point, I never really thought about it. And then I think going through school, I was heavily involved, in secondary school, I was heavily involved in all the school plays and everything going. And I'm from a very rural community as well. So we had the Young Farmers Clubs, and we would do arts festivals and one-act plays and three-act plays and all that kind of thing, and public speaking and debating and things. So I was always involved in those things, but I never really questioned that I would be able to do that with my life. So I maybe thought I'd be an art teacher or an English teacher, and in some way those things would be fed into what I'd be doing or teaching. But then I never thought specifically I could do that one thing. And even when I was training in it at the Royal Welsh College, I always thought, well, I'll probably not end up doing this. I'll probably give it a few years and then I'll be a teacher, because that seems like a normal solid job. And I've never really had much confidence in myself anyway. But so I think I probably never thought, well, I'd be any good at this or whatever. But Thankfully, I've kept going and in the long game of it all. But yeah, I never really thought about it. I think like a lot of people, I think they assume that the design just comes out of a warehouse somewhere, and so we just piece it together. Someone pieces it together, like a director like you would just piece it together, and we'd be like, okay, I'll have that bit, that bit, that bit, that bit. And in some ways, there's a truth to that. Like, I mean, there is like, but somebody has to make that thing initially to they have to make that physical thing, or like, we have to conceive a show together to, that's.
And so for somebody who maybe doesn't know about the role of a designer, or doesn't even, like you say, maybe people don't even, when they're watching a piece of theatre, they don't think that maybe somebody has conceived the whole look, whether it's, chosen a prop, designed the costumes, designed the whole concept. How would you describe your role? What does a designer do?
I think it's so difficult, isn't it? When you're like, I think what we do is we take. There's always that thing of like page to stage, isn't there? But like, I think and there's always a term we always use, like it looks like it sounds, or like say if you do a musical, like kind of if the show looks like it sounds, then that's a good thing. And if it looks like it's read on the page, then that's a good thing as well. So I think what we do is, and that's what's brilliant about theatre, is how it can be recycled, and different heads can come up with different things, and different directors come at something from a different angle than another director, and how we can make different productions of the one piece, or the one play, or one musical, ballet, whatever it is, and they can be so different and radical. I think what we do is we, as individuals, is we kind of just visually represent that script, or whatever that is, whatever art form that is, and try and find something fresh in it, try and rejuvenate it. If it's an old piece, you can maybe find something that, and I think it's trying to find something that's relatable to modern audiences, not just to yourself. I mean, there's a lot of yourself in that thing that you present on stage, but it's about making it relatable to everybody, because as we all know, theatre is a communal thing. We're there, it's a shared experience, and we have to, and that's what's magic about it, is that we're all in one theatre together, just having this one shared experience that night. And it's about trying to make the whole, trying everything together. And I think that's good. And but that's, everybody's doing it, choreographer, director, lighting designer, everybody's gelling this one thing together. So that's what I love about my job. It's just not just my job, it's everybody together making this one thing.
And how important is that collaboration with a director, for example, or a choreographer, or a lighting designer? How do those relationships work for you, and how do they sort of inform your process of creating a sort of visualization of a play or a musical?
I think they're essential. And I think, I'll be honest, whenever I was training, I think you're so stuck for 3 years, you're probably stuck in this thing of like, what is my voice? And you're only like 18, 19 when you go to study, or I didn't do a foundation year, so I never had a year to kind of experiment with what I was doing. But but I never really got what a lighting designer did, other than they lit your set, and that was it. And then and directors, I guess I never really it was always much more of a dictatorship. I think when we were at college, there was a kind of like, you do this, and maybe it was somebody who was trying to get a design out of you that they thought was what they wanted or whatever. So it was very hard, and we spent a lot of time in our own heads doing conceptual things, so we would make a very beautiful design. But if you were to direct the show on that design, it might not necessarily be a great production, I think, if that makes sense. But there's so I guess I never really knew until probably till my late 20s, or I guess when maybe like even starting to work with you as well, actually what that collaboration could be like, and actually how generous we could all be with each other, and how we can like get the most out of each other's work as well. Because you're such a visual director, there's like, you come at things from a very design-led way as well, which is so brilliant, because you're not left in the dark, and you all feel that you're aiming towards this one thing, and it's that's a brilliant feeling as well. So it's not just your work, it's everybody's work.
Yeah, I think that's so important, that the team are able to gel and really communicate and sort of make a mess together, and then from that mess build something really, you know, sort of beautiful and right for the play. And like you say, I think it was Hal Prince who said, if you can't see a musical, you can't hear it. And of course, what he was suggesting was that if the design doesn't support the music and the sort of conceptual language of a play, or whether it's a musical or a play, then it's always going to jar. And I remember those wonderful times we spent when Ian Brown, I think, buddied us up, didn't he, when we did Bollywood Jane at West Yorkshire Playhouse, as it was about, God, it must have been about 20 years ago now. And just those sort of early meetings of just sort of coming round and sharing research, and you working in the model box and sort of discarding ideas and then developing new ideas. And then we had sort of, we couldn't afford this, so just so happened the Playhouse had a drum revolve, so we ended up using the drum revolve, which sort of created the sort of foundation for that design. And it just sort of been this wonderful sort of collaborative sort of building of ideas, and each time more and more blocks going on.
It was brilliant for me at that time, because it was brilliant. It wasn't at the time, because I remember having glandular fever at that time, because I'd taken on nearly every job going as because you need to, because you don't get in the early days, you don't get enough money for the jobs you're doing, so you need to take on the work. You can't afford an assistant to do any of the work, so you're doing it all yourself. You burn it out, and that's what I always tell young designers: don't burn out. Try not burn out. But I burnt out, but I think when I met you was like a turning point in my career, in terms of meeting somebody of my generation who I got on with and clicked with, and felt I could go on a journey with as well, and actually make lots of new theatre, and exciting theatre as well, and big stuff, and being allowed like a playground like the old West Yorkshire Playhouse, the Leeds Playhouse, to kind of experiment in and as you say, make mess, and actually do things like Animal Farm, which was enormous and epic, and we had no money, but they did it, and we just those. It was just really great. Like someone of your generation, just kind of just being able to kind of just get on with it was really good, and people to trust in us at a young age as well, just to be able to great, go for it, guys. Let's see what you come up with. And
we were very lucky, and I think I remember getting that gig at West Yorkshire Playhouse because Kay Magson, who I'd worked with independently as a casting director on other shows, she'd sort of said to the then artistic director Ian Brown, have a look at Nikolai's work. And it was just sort of, it was just so fortuitous that you have those people who are sort of your cheerleaders. And then Ian had the vision to sort of bring us together. And as you say, there was no money, but we were able to do these massive shows. And it was really in part, it was absolutely in part because of those amazing tech crews and the expertise that are inherent in all of those buildings that we work at, whether it's the RSC or Curve or Leeds Playhouse, these incredible props makers and costumers and, set builders who have the skill and the knowledge to be able to absolutely make massive things out of very little, actually.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think those people are essential. I think you are nothing if you haven't got a good team behind you. And I think as much as you can create a very beautiful model box that can sit there like a museum piece, if you haven't got the wherewithal to make that thing 25 times bigger, you haven't got the resources, it's badly lit, there's no kit up there in the rig, there's no it's badly used, it's just pointless. You need an exceptional team around it. And that's the best thing as well. In the whole scheme of things, we are just cogs in this thing. And I know a lot of people think that theatre is like this hierarchy where there's these direct. I think that's changed, and I think it is still changing. I think there's maybe a generation of people who still think that, and who still feel that they have to kind of be that thing. And we all need leaders, and that's great, and we need people to kind of come to. But but as long as you're all working together to make this one thing, then that's that's really beautiful, and that's what I miss at the minute about not having theatre. I mean, look, we're lucky to keep on working and keep doing things that are going to hopefully be seen after this is through. But yeah, it's why I still do theatre. I mean, I think it's great. It's really magic.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And like you say, the hierarchy and all of that sort of nonsense, it doesn't mean anything, and it doesn't matter who comes up with the, you know, the best idea, or it's just about having the right idea. And, you know, whether that's the, you know, the work experience person who's making the props, or a producer, or whoever, it's about being collaborative and, you know, working together. And as you say, it's a shared experience.
Yeah.
What about, like, I can see in the background, you've got these, you know, these model boxes behind you. Tell me about when you're working on a sort of model and that 1 to 25 scale, and how important that part of the process is for you.
To me, it's always been important. I think I do a lot of thinking through the model. So, and I know there's a lot of chat about like the different processes. And actually, my husband and I talk about it all the time. He's a projection designer at Douglas. So we talk about like different processes and actually being able to like open yourself up to using different processes, and we do. And over the years, I have done that, and there's like and still continues to do so. And but for me, I like to think through the model as a physical thing. So I guess it's about that conduit between the thought here and then making the little thing. And I'm used to just working at that scale. I guess I can just tell what something is on a tiny version, what size it is, you know, without having to measure or whatever. So I guess that's easy for me. But and I think if I don't make something in a model, I can't really be that confident with somebody else about what that thing is going to look like. So I have to kind of model that thing up first. But so I will make, in my process, mostly I will make a 1 to 25 version of what you will see bigger in however many months. And it'll be fully formed and finished, and in some ways I was always taught that it's a kit for your team. So your prop supervisor knows exactly what those things are. The director knows where things can go. They can play in the model box, move things around. A choreographer knows how much space they've got. You can put the person in there. They know they can have 20 people on stage at that one time, or not at all. And there's like don't know what else you got, like just everyone, like painters even as well, scenery builders of course, but they're like you know, they all know what it is, and actually nobody's then disappointed when it doesn't look like the thing, because it should look exactly like that thing. So for me, it's a tool, it's a process, it's the way I've always worked. But there are other ways of doing it, but it's just about engaging in them and using them in the process as well. And
you mean in terms of like using computer modeling?
Yeah, I think so. And I've done that, and I think and I get it. And actually, part of, you know, say somewhere like the Royal Shakespeare Company, you can do your model, and then what we'll do is we'll end up putting it into. I keep looking down here. There's a model just here, but there's you end up then putting it into a computer program, so you have exactly that thing, and then you can light within it, and you know exactly when that thing is flying out, and it's much easier. And I guess in some ways that means that the model itself, the physical model that I've made, becomes a tool for the look and the actor and the director, but mainly for the paint shop as well, about how that thing is painted and looks and feels. And so there's lots of different technologies. And actually since I was like about 19, 20, there were different designers using these different computer programs to different degrees of success, I think. But it is astonishing what people are doing now. Like, I mean, and it would take like, I mean, maybe this is the time to be doing it if you have time to do stuff, but like it would take an enormous amount of time for me to learn that stuff, where I'd have to like take like a sabbatical of actually, you know, not doing any work, and there's lots of people who can do it much better than me. So I'm quite happy doing my thing and then passing that thing over, and then they can, you know, do the computer work on it. But I do, go on ahead.
And where does the sort of initial, because when you start with a play or a musical, you ostensibly begin with an empty model box of that space, that theatre you're going to create the work for. Yeah. Where does the initial sort of seed come? Is it about looking at the work of artists or musicians? Where does that sort of inspiration ignite the idea to start then putting objects and physically sort of creating a space? I always find that the most fascinating thing, where it's like a playwright, they start with an empty page and then suddenly bring it to life with characters and action. And I'm always amazed when I come around to your studio and suddenly you've these genius ideas. I'm curious what sort of ignites them. Is there a specific process you go through in order to sort of fuel your imagination?
Well, you say like genius process, but there's like, but I think a lot of ideas and a lot of like sparks of imagination come from people like you, and like from the play itself. I mean, there can be something that can just go right. Well, that's it. That's my nugget. And I remember reading about I think it was Richard Hudson, whenever he was designing The Lion King, he said he just didn't know what to do with it at all. Like, he just was like, how do I make this different to relatable but different to the film, and it isn't just the film on stage. And then he said, I think he found that eureka moment when he looked at African prints, and then he was able to use the prints and see what formations they would make stuff. So I think it's the eureka moment, and I think that in your gut when you get that moment where you go like, okay, I know exactly the through line for everything now. So you're able to go, so when someone says, what does this scene look like? You go, well, it would obviously be like this, because if that relates to the scene after and the one before, blah, blah, blah. So I think the seed of like where you begin starts very differently on each project. And I think like, say, something like Wizard of Oz, I'm finding a way in by making very small sculptural things, like, say, Professor Marvel's little bike that maybe transforms into something else. And that's one sculptural way of getting into that. And then from that little seed, everything else can start to grow and within that scene, and then it will knock on again. But so there's no particular way in, I think. It's just about keeping conversations open, chatting to you, say, for instance, and just seeing where your head's at with it, and if you had any thoughts. And it's about communication all the time, isn't it? It's just about keeping it open and free and not being able to make a mistake. You've always taught me that, just not being afraid to like have an idea that even if it's not the idea that you'll settle on, it's still an idea that can lead to something else. So yeah. I think, it changes in project to project. And and sometimes a director or a choreographer will come in and be like, I think it looks like this, and you go, I agree, let's just do that. And there's like, and that's brilliant, because somebody's got a real vision for that thing, and you can facilitate that vision in a way that's good for you as well, that you can feel confident with. But it's really, it's always different. Yeah.
And like a Curve, we've seen your incredible work on things like Sunset Boulevard, which we had a very clear idea sort of right from the get-go on. Grease and Beautiful Thing. Why do you enjoy working in Leicester and at Curve, and what does Curve mean to you?
Oh, I love Leicester. There's like, I think what you've created in Curve is somewhere that you can be wholly free, I think, to have the ideas, and I guess I feel like every time I've worked at Curve, again, your team are very ready and open and responsive, and you're not met with a kind of no, and you're not doing that, and it's like, it's a kind of, there's a real, again, it's they're all very excited to be doing what you're doing, and it's great fun, and the atmosphere is fantastic, especially like fit up and tech and previews are brilliant, because it's so shared with your community, I guess, your outer community, even people who have nothing to do with your theatre, who've just come in for a coffee and one of those really delicious chocolate wafer things. There's like, And Douglas says the paninis are really good as well. But there's like, even they get to see what you're doing on stage behind those caged walls and like being able to open up. Nobody else really lets you into that process. The theatre is this kind of like masked behind these walls and stuff. And even as much as that, you know, it might be hard for actors if they've gone through an emotional scene, but they still have to walk across that foyer to get to the lift, to get up to their dressing room. And I think that's really important because I think it's just the shared experience again of everything. It's like, it's really great. And it's just, you've made it somewhere you want to work, and that you can really achieve things. And we again achieved very big shows on very little money in that space, and delivered something to an audience who are really spoiled for, you know, theatre up in Leicester. I think it's fantastic what you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. And as you say, it's about the crew and the expertise which is inherent in the building, and that people know the spaces and know what they can do. And, you know, there's a challenge, and it, you know, everybody sort of works together to come up with a creative solution. And I always think with especially the larger space there, you're only sort of limited by your imagination. There's nothing we can't do there, whether it's going up or to the sides or beneath, you know, it's just been built with such sort of epic vision, and you know, it's sort of limitless, really. It's brilliant.
And actually, do you know, the thing is, like, it's good to have, it's good in some ways to have limits as well, but because if someone says no, you can't do that, and actually there is no money, then you just go, fine, I'm going to let that go, and we'll do this instead. But there's always a way of making something really epic. You've proved that on, like, you know, many times. We've done it. We've all done it. You can't, and actually not being really belligerent with your design and just being like, it has to be like this, and it has to be, we have to do this, it's the only way to tell this story. It's not true. There's many ways to tell a story. Theatre proves up time and time again. It's you know, it's such a kind of, you know, we can make another production of, somebody else would make another production of Grease in many years to come, or like, you know, there's like Sunset Boulevard is done all the time, you know, and I think it's fascinating how people find ways into that as well, you know, but our way felt right for us at the time. So yeah,
exactly.
Thing. Yeah.
And theatre, as you sort of touched on there, moves through fashions and phases, and there are multiple ways of doing things. And at the moment, there is a trend for plays and musicals to be quite austere, quite stripped back, quite cool in some ways, quite sort of sterile. Are you, as a designer, affected by those movements and sort of fashions and, you know, transitions in theatre? Do you sort of try and keep up with the sort of latest movements, or do you feel removed from any sort of movements like that?
I think you're always aware of them, and I think you can't not be aware of them if you're on things like, I'm barely on Twitter or Facebook, so Instagram is my kind of go-to sort of procrastination. But there's like, if you're on things like Instagram and you follow other designers or fashion designers or things, then there's no way you can not be aware of those things. But I think if you can't be true to yourself when you're making your own work, then I think there's no point trying to appropriate or copy people. But you can definitely be aware of the things. I mean, nothing is original anymore, and I think there's like, you know, like, and I guess, you know, I always think that fashion takes from theatre quite a lot, and I think theatre takes from fashion quite a lot as well. But fashion is seasonable and changes so much as well. So the same question could be asked of a fashion designer or like anybody else. But there's like, I think if you want to make something that's got longevity, that's like, you have to make it relatable to an audience, and I think you have to try and somehow tap into what the subconscious of that collective group of people about what they might want. It's like something like Matilda has kind of like, has just lasted for years because it's fresh and fun and like interesting and exciting, and it's kind of skewed the kind of musical theatre form in a way, but there's like visually as well, but there's like, and that's brilliant, and people come away from like a breath of fresh air. But there's like, I think it's about we are always making stuff for audiences, not for ourselves. So I think to try and like say to an audience, look at my design, it's really cool, aren't I really clever, is a really bad thing to do, because I think it will just put hands up to an audience and just be like, yeah, you're not coming in because I'm too cool here. So there's like, I think, yeah, it's for the audience always. And I think, yeah, I think that's where I stand with it. I've always stood like that. And I think, yeah, I can be aware of it, but I'll never really go, well, I have to do this now. So there's,
yeah. And there's always, I mean, theatre's always evolving, and there's new technologies and new sort of technical expertise and ideas sort of coming into the mix. Are there any sort of bits of kit or technology that you're sort of interested in, or you'd sort of love to see used in a production?
Yeah, no, I'm always, it's funny, I was thinking about this recently, but there's like, I think each production is different, because somebody will come, I noticed actually magic is getting used an awful lot on shows now. So like nearly there's a magician on every show, and that is fantastic for design, because you can achieve, there's like another world of possibilities that are opened up in terms of small kind of visuals and like bigger things, and like how costume is needed or used within all of that as well. Black spaces, these ninjas kind of like putting space, things into the space that you can't see. So it's amazing actually, that thing. And I've never really used magic until very recently, but so things like that. I mean, I use a lot of projection with Douglas as well, and that's not a new art form at all. That's been going for years now, but it's like, it feels like it's finally getting accepted into the kind of the realm of things, and it's part of, part of the creative team lineup is a projection designer, because again, that you can achieve so much and it kind of adds into the magic of things. But in terms of technology, I guess that changes, and there are so many new things, and I think it's just about, it's really hard to keep up with those things. But actually, if you come up with an idea and someone says you can do this with this, then that's maybe when you learn about that piece of technology or kit.
Yeah.
But I don't know that there's specifically anything I necessarily would be like, I don't know. I mean, lighting designer is always brilliant, because if I have a good conversation with them, they're like, well, there's this new light that does this now. And you're like, that's quite amazing. So there's like, I love all of that, but no, not really. I don't know. I'm open to anything really. I'll just
yeah. It was when we had Phantom with us just before the lockdown came. It amazed me, this brand new production of the original with new set and automation and everything. And the stage manager was telling me that the gondola, which the Phantom takes Christine down to the lair on, when that was first done in the 80s, because of course they were just sort of like using whatever worked, and sort of finding their way and making a brilliant mess, as we've sort of talked about earlier. And it was powered by an electric wheelchair motor, and that's how it was done. And so I was imagining, now in 2020, it would be some sort of, wonderful piece of kit and automation or whatever. And basically it's exactly the same motor, electric wheelchair motor as in the 80s, because it works.
Yeah. And actually there's a thing of like, we've done this before, we're like, I think we've done that before on a show, haven't we, with Dodgems? But there's like, there is this brilliant thing in theatre where like, you kind of like, well, I know this really lo-fi thing works, so let's just try it. And actually it sometimes is better than the really expensive version of that, because it's not going to break and someone doesn't have to come and program the thing. And that's like, so I agree. I think that those things are really interesting. That's what's brilliant about theatre, isn't it? You can kind of like just sort of build around these strange apparatus. But
well, it's always finding solutions, practical solutions, a lot of the time from everyday life, in order to create something very magical and completely original. So what advice would you have for somebody wanting to follow in your footsteps, become a theatre designer? What sort of tips and ideas would you wish to share with somebody like that listening into this interview?
I would say, thinking about it to myself back then, back in the day, I think you just have to. I remember in my early days, I contacted everybody, and I mean, it was very early days of email. I mean, if you sent someone an email, it was very personal, as to like send them straight to their inbox, you know. So that was like a thing. But like now it's fine. But like, so everyone's whizzing emails around all the time and stuff. But I used to just write a letter to people and send my business cards and all that stuff and things like that. But I would honestly just keep in contact with people. If there's people's work you love seeing, directors, designers, choreographers, anything, just contact them and say really, you know, their work speaks to you and, you know, you'd love to meet them or whatever. I think it's just that. And also just, I think just try and work hard, but not burn out. And I think, you know, it was a lighting designer, Tim Mitchell, who we worked with together, but he has said to me one time, you know, I maybe it was my like mid-20s, I was just like, you can see other people kind of, their trajectories go like that, and your trajectory is kind of just still like this, and maybe you get a spike and it's like, you know, do something else. But he said to me, it was a long game. Like, it's always a long game. And actually, you know, if you want to finish this job at like, you know, 35 and go on to do something else, then that's fine for you. You know, you can do that thing, but you've got to keep on going on. And you're trying to earn a living, you know, you're trying to like, so it's just trying to keep calm, carry on, just keep churning out the work, and hope that it's meeting the right people and saying the right things and all of that, and just have fun with it and don't take it too seriously. And I think there's a whole new generation of designers coming up through who I think are having fun and are really supportive of each other and friends with each other. And that's brilliant, because it's such a weird occupation where it can be really, really lonely as well, where you're just in your studio, like doing like alone with your thoughts, kind of like trying to process stuff. And like, I think if you can keep talking to people and sharing things and how weird you feel about doing this thing, or like if you feel lonely or anxious or whatever and stuff, that stuff's really helpful as well. And I've got a good group of friends around us, and like, you know, we're all able to chat and you know, and about mental health and all that stuff as well. There's like, it's we can all chat and talk about those things as well, because it can get you down. And especially at the minute, I know there's a lot of people that are very down about this and like very in the dark about where this is going to lead us to, and what's beyond this whole pandemic, and that can be very, very hard. And I think starting out just now as well is going to be difficult, really difficult. And it's people like us, I guess, who can help people along and maybe give jobs or like, you know, help too. So I think reach out as well is another thing.
Yeah. I think starting out as a designer or an actor or a director at a time before the lockdown and the pandemic sort of hit was challenging enough. But I think, you know, if you just graduated from a drama school, it's, you know, these are really challenging times. And I think, as you say, we have a responsibility as people who are a bit further along to be people who people can reach out to, and whether it's just having a conversation or just a friendly chat with, as well as maybe offering some advice is more important than ever, really. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And when this is all over, this lockdown, and we're sort of out the other end and we're back in our theatres making shows, are there, which, you know, will happen. What sort of work are you interested in? What are your sort of ambitions? What are the sort of plays or musicals or sorts of work you'd like to do in the future? I think, thinking about this recently as well, I think the landscape of shows is possibly going to change for a little bit of time. And I think people are going to want, I mean, I know I will probably want this, it's something feel good, and I'm going to want to come and be lifted into somewhere else. So I think, and I find like, because, you know, we can work on shows like 16 months in advance. I found already like possibly there's, you know, stuff that's coming in for next year is very imaginative and is about just that thing of like just being transposed to another world, and like
getting lost in your imagination. And so I feel that that's the kind of stuff that's going to happen. And I know that's the kind of stuff I'm probably doing at the minute as well. And it'll quite often be more populist as well as a thing. So I feel that that's where we're going to go. And actually, I'm quite happy doing that. I feel like I'm very lucky with the things I get offered, in that they are really good fun. They're really meaty. They're things people maybe want to see, and yeah, but each one is different. I mean, I've probably got like 4 things on at the minute, which are all very different, but equally, I would want to go and see each one of them, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So I guess, yeah.
Well, we're very excited to see your Wizard of Oz at Curve, and I know as we're sort of chugging along with it at the moment, it's already looking incredible. But it's been such a pleasure to talk to you, and really humbling as your friend and colleague to learn about your past and your journey into the industry, because often we don't get time to talk about those things. It's always so sort of frenetic with work. So it's been a real privilege for me personally, and I know people listening into this will be as inspired and feel as inspired as I have chatting to you. So Colin, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.